Great to have you with us on WPR News. Larry Mealer here. Today we begin the show by talking with you about basic university research and how, in this case, at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, it resulted in cancer screening technology that saved millions of lives. We're talking today with a couple of guests who are intimately involved in this whole process. James Dahlberg is a UW-Madison professor emeritus of biomolecular chemistry. He played a very significant role in the development of diagnostic tests for many types of cancer. James Dahlberg, welcome. Thanks for joining in today.
Thanks, Larry. It's pleased to be here.
And, well, it's great to have you here. He's joined by his colleague, Brad Schwartz, a practicing physician scientist and the CEO of UW-Madison's Morgridge Institute for Research. And, Brad, thank you for joining in as well.
Thank you for having us, Larry.
As we talk with our two guests, I hope you'll join in. What questions do you have about how medical tests, life-saving medical tests, are made possible by research done on campuses like UW-Madison? Maybe you have some specific questions relating to the tests that we'll be talking about today. I hope you'll join in. The number to call, 800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. That's talk@wpr.org. James, let's start with you. You had a remarkable decades-long career as a UW-Madison biochemist, later as an entrepreneur. Your research has led to the development of diagnostic tests for colorectal cancer, for cystic fibrosis, human papillomavirus, or HPV. How did you get along this path in your life?
Let me start off by saying that I had a very supportive wife, and she still supports me. Without her, it wouldn't have been possible. But I've always been curious on how things work, and just if there's a question that I see, I'll sort of start investigating about it. What I can learn about it. I mean, now I'm an emeritus professor, so I don't have a lab or anything, so now it's more academic. I just read, I sit in my office and read the computer, but it's the discoveries that you referred to were done when I was a professor, active professor at the university in the biomolecular chemistry department. Even though the department is in the medical school, there's no requirement that we do a medically important research. It's just anything that we find is very important to us in terms of biology. And there was an experiment that didn't work the way it should. And as Brad likes to say, the main sound of discovery is, wow, I didn't expect that. And so we had a result that we couldn't explain, and so we decided we would follow up on that. And this was when we were investigating the structure of the genetic material that we all have, DNA. Mm-hmm. Different DNA molecules can take different shapes. We're normally exposed to the picture of DNA that looks like a long pencil, right? A long string. But in fact, when DNA is actually functioning, it takes on different shapes. And we were interested in some of those other shapes. What we were trying to do was to make some of these shapes in the test tube and figure out what stabilized them, how they worked, and so forth. And by we synthesized them on a piece of paper. We wrote down what it should be, what we thought it should be, and tried to make the molecules in the test tube. And we were never successful in making them. And this is obviously very basic research.
Yeah.
There's no application whatsoever. But we finally found out, realized that even though we were unsuccessful in making these molecules, they were in fact being made. I'll cut to the chase here. They were being made, but the same enzyme that we were using to synthesize them also had the ability to degrade them. And so we were making things and chopping them up at the same time. And so this cleavage activity was what I was interested in. I said, this is something new, and we'll see how is it working? How does it know to cleave this DNA molecule and not every DNA molecule in the cell? And so following that up, we discovered there's a certain structure that the enzyme is capable of cleaving. I also realized that I could make any molecule into that structure just by manipulating some other things that I was adding to the reaction. And I actually did have a eureka moment at that point. I remember I was sick in bed with the flu, staring at the ceiling, and then I realized that, hey, if I can make any molecule take this shape, and I have the enzyme that will cut the molecule when it does have that shape, it's a way that I could cut any DNA molecule at any point place that I determine, and that was really the invention. And so I saw that this would be a very useful way of investigating DNAs in general. And I went to WARF. I made a disclosure to WARF, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, that is the intellectual property agent for the UW-Madison. I went to them and they said, yeah, it's worth patenting. It could have some utility. And so they did. And so WARF had the patent. And because of the Bayh-Dole Act, WARF owned the patent, even though the research had been done at the university using federal funds, NIH funds. So once we had the patent, or we had applied for the patent at that time, I happened to be sitting next to a friend, Lloyd Smith, who's a chemistry professor here. And Lloyd and I were talking about what we're doing, and Lloyd had just come on campus and had, prior to coming here, had worked with a good friend of his, Lance Fors, and decided that they would start a company. They wanted to do a company, and it was going to be analysis of DNA. But they still lacked some of the technology that was required. So Lloyd and I decided, why don't we try to get together? And so the three of us, Lloyd, Lance, and myself, started a company, Third Wave Technologies, which was based here in Madison. So at that point, we had no money, and we actually didn't have the patent because WARF had the patent. WARF had the intellectual property that was required for our company. So we had to negotiate with WARF about how do we get our hands on this intellectual property so we could actually do something with this company that we had had. And at the time, the CEO of WARF, Dick Laser, decided he'd take a chance with us. And this was the first time that WARF had, or up to that point, WARF had never licensed an invention back to the UW faculty member, the inventor. And also they had never taken equity in a company, a startup company. But Dick Laser decided that he would take a chance and do both with us. And so it solved two problems for us. First of all, we didn't have to put a lot of money into it. we could just give Worf some equity of just a piece of paper at that time.
Well,
and we were off to the races after that.
yeah. Worf, we should mention, we should talk a little bit about Worf, and maybe, Brad, you can join in on this too, because there's certainly, you're with the Mortgage Institute, and there's quite a relationship between Worf and the Mortgage Institute. And Worf, I'm doing a little history in my head here. I think it was about 1925 when Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation was established, if I'm not mistaken. And I was trying to remember who was the instigator of it. Go ahead. Go ahead, Brad.
So that would be Harry Steenbach.
Oh, of course.
Who was
Vitamin D.
That's right. Who was the chair of biochemistry at the time. And it's a fascinating story because in today's world, capitalizing on discoveries, the intellectual property from universities is a hot topic. We hear a lot about companies being started on both of the coasts, and most people don't realize that the pathfinder for this was in the middle of the country at Wisconsin. So the story actually goes back to Harry Steenbach's graduate mentor, Babcock. Mm-hmm. And so he's the one that discovered or developed the butterfat test for quality of milk. He did not patent it. And at that time, the prevalent idea was that anything that was developed in universities was available for the whole society to use. The result was that a lot of charlatan operators came along and represented themselves as having the butterfat test and getting farmers to pay them to do the test, and they never did it well and didn't give accurate results. So by the time Harry Steenbach isolated vitamin D and saw that it would prevent and cure rickets, he wanted to be able to put it out there for people to use, but he had seen how bad actors could misrepresent things, and so he wanted to patent it so that the whole idea was to protect the integrity of the vitamin D. And so he went to the university, and again, this was a different time.
Sure.
And the university said, no, we don't do that. So he went to the state, and the state said, no, we don't do that. And so he got together with, I think, 5 or 6 of his friends, and they were all alums from the University of Wisconsin. And they all pitched in $100 each, and they formed the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, WARF. And the sole reason for WARF's existence was to patent discoveries that were made through research at the University of Wisconsin with the goal of, number one, protecting the integrity of the discovery, and then number two, if any money were to come from licensing it, this money would go back to the university to help build future research enterprises.
It's an amazing story, and if I'm not mistaken, the amount of money that has been returned in the form of those patents back to WARF and then back to the UW-Madison is somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 million.
I think that's probably true. It may even be north of $500 million.
Could be north.
Yeah.
It could well be north of $500 million.
It's a good investment for those $100.
That's it.
$100 a piece.
That's right.
My guys.
You know, this is so fascinating that WARF actually now has a full-time historian on staff, and that would be a recommendation for a future show.
That might make a good. And actually, in WARF in turn, played a role in the development or the establishment of the Mortgage Research Institute, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it was about 20 '08, maybe, in
Yeah.
the late 20s. We had an investigator here, Jamie Thompson, who was thinking about leaving the university for a number of reasons, and one of them was that he had to have some sort of independent funding for his research, which was on human embryonic stem cells. And he went to Worf and said, or somebody went to Worf on his behalf and said that we need to keep Jamie here because of the research he's doing. And at that point, Worf decided that it was really important to keep investigators such as Jamie, here on campus. So Worf put up, I think it was $50 million, and the university put up $50 million, and John and Tasha Morgridge put up $50 million to get this started. And they decided they would have an institute that was affiliated with the university but independent of the university too. And as a result, a building was constructed, which is right in the middle of the campus, which is wonderful because there's a lot of collaboration and communication between Morgridge investigators and investigators on the UW side.
This is fascinating stuff here as we talk information here, as we talk with our two guests today, James Dahlberg, UW-Madison Professor Emeritus of Biomolecular Chemistry, instrumental in bringing several types of health screenings, including colon cancer and HPV and another cystic fibrosis, which I even have my own little story about that. We may have time to get into it, but I know there are questions out there, and we have callers online with some questions, and we will get to those right after this. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Great to have you with us here on WPR News. We're taking a look at visiting with a couple of folks from the University of Wisconsin. James Dahlberg, Professor Emeritus of Biomolecular Chemistry, and Brad Schwartz, practicing physician scientist, CEO of the Morgridge Institute for Research. And we're looking at some of the fantastic research that James and Brad as well have done. James has been very instrumental in several types of health screenings, including colon cancer and human papilloma virus for homes and hospitals, and of course Cologuard as well. And looking for your comments or questions at 800-642-1234, email to talk@wpr.org. And let's take a call. Bill in Cameron, we'll give you a chance. Hi, Bill. Bill, are you there? Oh, we may have lost Bill, or we can't hear him anyway. So instead, what we'll do is go to Richard in Manitowoc. Richard, hi.
Hey, I just got caught up in the Cologuard. Got one sent to me. Took the test. It recently came back with positive results. Now I'm left with a lot of anxiety and not knowing what's going to happen to me, what I'm supposed to do other than this colonoscopy, and is this just a big thing to get a lot of more business into the hospital to get colonoscopies, or should I take things seriously, and if so, what should I be doing to minimize any progress of the cancer while I'm waiting for my test?
Okay. Brad, let's go to you. Brad.
Okay, so this is something you should take seriously. The Cologuard test actually grew out of original curiosity-driven research that was done by a scientist named Bert Vogelstein at Johns Hopkins University. And he was studying how colon cancer begins and then how it evolves into something that spreads all over the body and ends up doing people in. And what he discovered was in its earliest stages, colon cancer starts out as just a little bump on the inside of the colon. And it has very specific molecular events inside of the cells in that bump. And if you can detect those molecular events, then you can say, whoa, colon cancer is starting in there. And the question is, how do you find it? And that's what the colonoscopy is for. So they look inside. And it turns out if you catch these little bumps at an early stage, they can use this instrument to just take the bump out. They don't have to do a great big surgery. They just remotely take this little bump out through the colonoscope, and they retrieve it and look at it under the microscope. And if you catch it early enough and they remove this bump, it is as if you never had it. So you get cured of colon cancer. And if you don't catch it at an early stage, then it progresses, it grows bigger, it grows a little more unruly, and it's the sort of thing that eventually gets so big that it can invade through the wall of the colon, and it can spread to other parts of your body. So this is an early warning that tells you there's something that is in there that should be found, and it should be taken out so that it doesn't progress. This is something to take very seriously.
And I'll tell you, Richard, based on my own experience, the last time that I had to go in for a colonoscopy, I had one of those removed, and I had no idea it was being removed. I didn't have any resulting problems after the fact. And so the fact that you had the Cologuard, it showed the bump, and now you want to go and get it taken out, basically.
That's right.
And it's, I guess, James, the value of the Cologuard in that sense is that if you have it and it shows nothing, then you don't, basically you're not having to go through the colonoscopy.
Well, I think I can't speak for Exact Sciences, the company that makes it. But,
Yeah.
But I think it's clear that it's a good screen. It's not 100% accurate, but nothing is. But it certainly is a good indication that one should consult with one's physician and see have a follow-up when there's a positive result.
All right. Richard, there you have it. That's the advice. And I'm not going to tell you to take that advice, but it's probably good advice to listen to. Let's put it that way. Bill and Cameron, we'll go to you. Hi, Bill.
Yes, good morning. I just wanted to quickly call in and say my doctor really believes in the Cologuard test, and he's ordered it about 3 times, maybe 4 times in the last 10 years. The last time I did the Cologuard test was about 3 months ago, and it came back positive. So they ordered a colonoscopy. The colonoscopy showed 1 precancerous polyp. So the Cologuard picked up 1 polyp that was precancerous. So and now we're going to be watching that. They did remove it, of course, when they did the colonoscopy, but I just think that Cologuard test is a wonderful test and was so beneficial that it picked up just 1 polyp that was precancerous for me. So when I heard you introduce your show this morning, Larry, I thought, hey, this is right what I'm going through right now. So I really, really think that the Cologuard test is a great test.
Oh,
That's great.
Bill, thank you so much. You guys, I would guess that you guys get some response from people over time, or even personally, that sort of mirror what Bill was talking about.
Well, it certainly is a good feeling to hear people like Bill and others who say that they've taken action they would not have taken otherwise because of this test. So it's very gratifying to hear that.
Yeah.
I'd just like to point out, I personally have not had a influence on making the Cologuard test. It was I had an assay that the people at Exact Sciences used after I retired. I mean, it's not my test. It's just that they used my technology, and it's very nice to see that the basic technology that I did many years ago is still being used and being useful for people.
Yeah.
I think that's an example of how successful applications use developments from lots of different fields. So you find something that works well, and as Jim says, it may not have been part of the founding technology for Exact Sciences, but they saw that the technology did exactly what they wanted, and it made their product better. And so these successful applications use the results of lots of different research activities to make their products better.
Yeah.
That's why curiosity-driven research is so important, because you never know where it's going to be useful. And you make a discovery and just put it out there, and somebody's going to come along and say, hey, I could use that, and it'll make my discovery that much better.
I remember, I'm thinking back here to Bill Proxmire.
Yes.
The Golden Fleece.
Who would have his Golden Fleece Award, and he might have caught a few, but sometimes those awards were based on basic research, and why the heck would anybody want to do that, Brad?
So Bill Proxmire had his Golden Fleece Award because it was good politics. He could say to his constituents, the federal government is using your tax dollars to do studies on why chickens get cancer from viruses. And that sounds really absurd, right? Well, the guy that was doing that research was a guy named Howard Temin. Mm-hmm. And Howard Temin ended up being awarded the Nobel Prize for that work. And that work gave the basic makings of the entire DNA technology revolution. So the majority of these miraculous new medicines that you see advertised on TV that have allowed lots of diseases to become treatable were all treatable because of the DNA technology revolution. And yet the question that drove Howard Temin was not, how can I develop a new technology? It was, everyone in the world says viruses don't cause cancer. So why is it that chickens do get cancer from this virus? And he was just unquenchably curious about that. And as Jim says, the thing about curiosity-driven research, I'll back up a little bit and I'll say that Tasha Morgridge always says the most effective kind of learning is curiosity-driven learning, which is true. Mm-hmm. If you think about, the things that stick with you. And by the same token, the most effective kind of research is curiosity-driven research, because it's something that the researcher just has to know, just has to do. So if you discover something and it turns out to be true, at some time or another, that information will be valuable to somebody. You can't predict who it's going to be valuable to. You can't predict when it will be, but somebody will find a way to use it. So after Howard Temin discovered this enzyme that made recombinant DNA technology possible, it was somebody else who said, whoa, I can use that for some practical purpose, and transformed all of research and all of medicine.
Well, I was thinking back as you were talking, because I had many chances to talk with Howard Temin on this program. Many delightful conversations with him. And James, I'm pretty sure you had many conversations with him as well, or
yeah,
perhaps.
Well, yes, Howard and I lived about a block apart, and it was about 4 miles from the campus. But he liked to walk into the lab every day, even on very snowy days. And so I joined him, and so we would have these long conversations where we walked along Monroe Street coming into the campus every day.
Probably stimulated both of your thinking.
Well, certainly, yeah. I certainly did a lot of research in the same field as a result of talking with Howard.
Yeah. John in Baronet has a question you may or may not be able to answer. Let's go there. Hey, John, thanks for calling.
You bet. Thank you, guys. Great show. My question is, I've been told that if you use the Cologuard test, send it in, no matter how it comes back, that Medicare, if you're on Medicare and that's your only insurance, they will not pay for a regular colonoscopy for a year.
Boy, I don't know the answer to that. I think you'd probably have to talk to somebody at your doctor's office or your insurance company if you've got supplemental insurance. That's something I'm not certain of.
Yeah. I am not either. And darn, I wish I knew right off the top. Maybe somebody else can call in and that. But I think your advice, Brad, is good to call either whoever your insurance company is or your doctor, your own physician, family physician. I wish I could be more helpful on that. But that's probably the best advice. And you can join in too, by the way. Number to call, 800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234. Or you could email us. The email address, talk@wpr.org. That's talk@wpr.org. Brad, I'd like to talk to you for a minute, too, because you're a practicing physician, and your focus of your research is on hematosis.
Or hematology, blood clotting, right?
Blood clotting, yeah. Talk about that. Why did you get in that?
Well, I actually started out to be a chemist. And so I had a very molecular approach. And I went into medicine because I wanted to teach at a university. And medical school faculties were just developing, and there were lots of career opportunities. So that's why I went into medicine. I had always focused on the molecular aspects of various things I was studying, and hematology really captured my imagination. And at the time, blood clotting was one area that probably had among the deepest molecular understanding of what was going on. And so I gravitated towards that. And I, to this day, find it fascinating. And I find that understanding the detailed molecular mechanisms of what some people may see as an arcane reaction in the body actually helps me understand a clinical situation much better, and helps me make the judgment calls and sometimes the therapeutic decisions that would be more difficult without that deep of knowledge.
Really cool stuff. It's really cool stuff. Well, I want to tell you a little story. When I was 12 years old, I had a friend, David, in school, and he had a younger sister. And we were I'd see them both, and then suddenly I didn't see his sister around. And so I asked him, "Where's your sister?" And he said, "Well, she's sick. She has something they call, I think it's like cystal fibrosis, and so cystic fibrosis." And that was a death sentence for her, and it wasn't long before I've experienced the first time having a friend, someone I knew, die. So it was and you can imagine what it was like for the family. It affected me, but it certainly had a much larger effect. And some of your work James has a relationship, and by the way, that was a long time ago. And cystic fibrosis, now, folks, it's still it's a fatal disease, but as opposed to dying in a year or whatever, people live to be 50, 60 years old, even some into to 70. But the fact that you have you're in part responsible for a test for cystic fibrosis.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, I mean, I developed the technology, but
Yeah.
I'm not a clinician. So and it's very gratifying to know that the technology that I put out there is being used by others. And cystic fibrosis is just one example, I think. And, of course, the colon cancer is another example, and also HPV, the cervical cancer diagnosis that we have. We developed a third wave. But all of these things are very nice to hear about. But I'm glad that I was able to contribute to some of it. And it's the work of many, many people, not just me, of course, that is developing all these assays.
Yeah. Ray in Madison may have something about insurance relating, an insurance-related answer for us. Ray, thank you for calling. Oh, darn. Maybe we'll get him back. He's a surgeon and had some comments about he was listening and may have some comments. Ray, have we got him there yet? Oh, I think his phone may have died. Well, Ray, try again because we'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, Jill or Jeff or somebody passed me along that there is a website that the caller can go to relating to insurance, and it's just if you go to Cologuard.com/insurance, it'll go right to at least a broad, well, maybe a very specific comment relating to Medicare and Cologuard. So Stella may also be able to talk with us about it in Sturgeon Bay. Stella, hi. Thanks for calling.
Hi. Yeah. My husband took there's 2 points I'd like to raise. My husband took the Cologuard test, and it came back indicating that he should get a colonoscopy. We're on Medicare, original Medicare, not Medicare Advantage. And he was scheduled for a colonoscopy as soon as we could, and Medicare covered both. So there was no problem at all with Medicare covering a colonoscopy following a Cologuard test, at least where it indicated that a colonoscopy was recommended for follow-up.
Well, Stella, thank you very much for calling, and you know what? That makes sense to me. Why wouldn't you have a test?
Yeah.
It wouldn't make any sense any other way. But I appreciate very much you calling in, Stella. Appreciate it. Talking with James Dahlberg and Brad Schwartz today from the University of Wisconsin. James, of course, emeritus professor of biomolecular chemistry, and Brad Schwartz, practicing physician, CEO of the Morgridge Institute for Research. I hope you'll join in with your own thoughts. The number is 800-642-1234, or you could email us to talk@wpr.org. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Great to have you with us today as we talk about the research going on the UW-Madison campus that has led to a number of life-saving work by not only folks from the UW-Madison, but from probably around the world, with our guests today, James Dahlberg and Brad Schwartz from the UW. And Brad, I know you wanted to make a comment about another comment about research, curiosity-driven research.
So, thank you. I think it's worth looking a little deeper at what that means. So, curiosity-driven research is a term that we use instead of saying basic research or applied research or translational research. And the reason is it's all curiosity-driven. And different people are curious about different things. And so, once again, what drives a good researcher is this unquenchable thirst to figure out how something works. So it may be somebody's curious about the basic mechanism of how something works. And once he or she figures that out, there may be somebody else that is curious about, what can I use this for? Mm-hmm. And then there may be somebody else who's curious about some disease that might benefit from using the thing that was developed. So it turns out that every step is really driven by curiosity. And I think it would be important for people to, number one, keep that in mind, and to not divide up research into basic research and applied research that are all arguing over resources. I think that research is sometimes seen as an arcane undertaking that most of us don't get any benefits from. And nothing could be further from the truth. You know, there are societal benefits. So we can take care of diseases that we couldn't take care of before. More people are living longer and happier. Every time there's a new development or treatment, oftentimes there's a new company that is formed, and that company ends up generating revenue. That company pays taxes to the state, pays taxes to the United States. We all get benefits from that. That company creates jobs. People come in, get good paying jobs that will last for a long time. But there are also more sort of direct advantages that each of us sees, because when we talk about research and coming up with new treatments, sometimes we think about rare diseases, and they're not always rare. So my favorite example of this is my brother-in-law's encounter with appendicitis. So it wasn't that long ago that if you had appendicitis, you'd have to have surgery, which would keep you in the hospital for 4 to 7 days, and you would be out from work for 3 to 6 weeks before you could go back, and you'd have to be very careful about your activity. So my brother-in-law developed appendicitis on a Wednesday evening. He went into the hospital. He had his surgery through laparoscopic intervention, which is sort of like a periscope when they look inside your abdomen. They took out his appendix. They did everything they needed to do, and he was back in the office at full speed on Friday. And that is something that happens now almost all the time. And I think appendicitis is so common that we see it as a regular thing. So it's not just the surgery. It's the CT scans that allow us to be very, very accurate about knowing when somebody needs surgery and who doesn't need surgery. And all of those things are the direct results of curiosity-driven research. So we all benefit from that.
I was thinking about my freshman year in college when the night before my first final of 5 final exams at the end of the semester, I had to go in and have my appendix out. So I missed all my exams and then had to take them the next semester while I was taking 5 more courses. I wish they'd had that laparoscopic version back then. So that's a very good one. Tom in Menominee, we'll get to you. Tom, thanks for calling.
Thank you. My question is in reference to the National Institute of Health and how your research is or was funded. Is that going to impact you in any way if they're going to have dramatic cuts to that program, or how does that work in reference to your research?
Go ahead, James.
Well, excuse me. In my own case, I've retired, so it's not going to affect me directly. But I have many colleagues who are very seriously affected by these cutbacks. Many of the cutbacks from the NIH and from NSF, both federal funds, funding agencies, many of the cutbacks seem quite arbitrary to us, and it's hard to discern just where there's a pattern. But when the cutbacks do occur, which are substantial, they can be very disruptive for a career, but also for the research that's being investigated. There are a number of cases that I know of where people have had spent years developing strains of cells or strains of animals or plants that they have to put on hold or just destroy because the funding is suddenly pulled out, like pulling the rug out from under you. And it's not as if you can stop it 1 week and then a week later turn it back on.
Yeah.
It's going to set research back very significantly. The cuts that we're already seeing and the ones that are being sort of on the horizon. So I think this is a very serious problem for the scientific community, not only in the U.S., but throughout the world, because we impact, our research is impactful throughout the world through collaborations.
Yeah. And Brad, I know you want to.
So I want to second that very loudly and point out that this is the kind of research that companies will not pick up because the research in the early phases of figuring out how something works has no immediate application, and companies are doing what they're doing to make a profit. And if there's not a likelihood that they'll be able to turn something towards a profit in a reasonable period of time, they won't do it. And as a matter of fact, if you go back over the past number of years and look at instances when federal funding for research was under threat, it's easy to dig up, to come upon advertisements that were taken up by groups of companies saying, this research is important to us, we can't do it, but we depend upon what university researchers do to give us the things that we need that we can develop products from. So the other aspect is if a university research lab has to close because there is not sufficient funding to support their work, the very skilled researchers that work there are sort of cast to the wind, and there's not an easy way for them to be able to get a job that takes advantage of their expertise and their experience. Now, they're smart people, they're good at what they do, they usually find something else. But if funding comes back online, you don't have a ready workforce that has that deep expertise and experience that is ready to step in and get things going again. It's usually a long startup period if funding comes back online.
It's just a terrific waste of money, basically, and skills.
And skills. Well, and in the meantime, you guys, let's hope that we can get some resolution on some of this. And in the meantime, I want to thank you both for the work that you've done and continue to do. I appreciate it very much. And hopefully, maybe we can have a chance to talk about this again down the road. I think it was really interesting. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the calls. But there you have it. James, Brad, thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll look forward to another chance to talk with you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
James Dahlberg is UW-Madison Professor Emeritus of Biomolecular Chemistry, instrumental in bringing several types of health screenings to the marketplace, including colon cancer, HPV, and cystic fibrosis, among others. Fun to have and interesting to have them with us, and thank you for listening in. Coming up, we're going to switch gears entirely. It's the county fair season. We'll be talking about judging at the fairs next. I'm Larry Mealer. Great to have you along today on WPR News. Larry Mealer here, and right now we are going to talk about all those blue, red, and white ribbons you're going to see awarded to exhibits at your local county fair. Becky Gutzman is our guest. She's served as a judge at every county fair in the state of Wisconsin. I can't believe there are too many people who have done that. She is also a retired extension educator for UW Extension in Columbia and Dodge counties. And as we talk with Becky, I hope you'll join in. What questions you have about maybe how animals are judged, or the artwork, or the food that's judged at the fair. Maybe you've got an experience you want to share as a judge yourself, or maybe you have a question about why you only got a red ribbon on something. Give us a call. The number's 800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234, or you can email us to talk@wpr.org. Becky Gutzman, welcome. Thanks for taking time to be with us today.
You're welcome, Larry. I'm so happy to be here with you.
And as I understand it, you're at a county fair.
I am. I'm sitting in one of the exhibit buildings at the Sauk County Fair in Baraboo, waiting for my judging that'll start about 1 o'clock this afternoon. So,
And what are you judging today?
Today I'm doing flowers and vegetables and field crops, anything plant science related.
Well, you've had
And
go ahead.
And I'm doing the youth members today, so they'll be bringing their exhibits to me individually, and I'll be looking at them. I'll be back here on Wednesday doing the open class plant and soil exhibits.
That's great. How did you get started in this?
Well, I was a 4-H member for years in Columbia County, in Kenosha County, where I grew up. And so, of course, I entered exhibits at the Kenosha County Fair. I started out showing dairy cattle one year because all my brothers did it. And I decided that wasn't my cup of tea, but everything in the house was. And so, for years, a friend of mine and I would sit at the judging tables in the open class buildings watching my mother's exhibits being judged, and she was managing the Farm Bureau food stand. So every few classes, we'd run back and say, "Mom, you got a blue ribbon on your fudge. Oh, you only got a red on your bread." And so I have watched judging and participated in judging for a lot of years, and I just thought, this is something I really want to do.
And so you got started as part of through 4-H. Did you get started then?
Yes. Well, after I was out of 4-H and after I was out of college, I actually had an internship as a summer 4-H agent. And at that time, a lot of the 4-H agents judged for each other at each other's fairs. And they said, "Hey, you need to come along and learn to become a judge." I said, "Yeah, I want to." And so then after I graduated from college, I was hired as a 4-H agent in Columbia County and started getting invitations. My very first fair was here in the Sauk County Fair, 52 years ago, so 1973, and I was judging foods. And, of course, in those days, so many kids belonged to 4-H, and everybody and their cousin entered foods. So I had a class of 44 plates of chocolate brownies. Can you imagine trying to judge all those?
And you have to take a bite of every one, don't you?
Well, I tried not to. There was a few that looked not really very good, and one was so burnt on the bottom, and I thought, I'm just not going to taste these. And one lady kept bringing that plate of burnt brownies back to me. "Well, you haven't tasted this one yet." And I'm pretty sure it was her daughter's. So I am a tasting judge, though. I do like to get into things and see how they're made.
Well, I've done a lot of that myself, and maybe we'll get into some of my stories about judging at food contests as well. But you've served as a judge at every county fair in the state of Wisconsin. How long did that take?
And I don't think that anybody else has ever done that, and most people think I'm crazy when they hear it. But I do. I love judging so much. And so over the years, as I was doing it, more counties kept asking. And after my kids were grown, then I had a little bit more time to think about this. I thought, I really love this. I wonder if anybody's ever done it. And so I started putting feelers out saying, hey, I'd like to come to your fair or your fair. And it was a challenge to get invited to the fairs far up north, because here I am down in Columbia County, because a lot of fairs pay their judges a stipend and mileage. And so they don't want to hire somebody who lives too far away. And I would always say to them, I'll come for whatever you normally pay your judges. This is not about breaking the bank on your end. It's about fulfilling my bucket list. And so I would say the last 15 years, I have really worked hard at getting those invitations. I'd send out feelers in the winter, and I had other people on the Fairs Association saying, hey, this lady really wants to come and judge at every fair. And so last summer, I judged at the final fair for all the official county fairs in the state of Wisconsin. It was up in Florence County, Wisconsin. So great way to end up.
Oh, that's what a great story. I love that so much. And so it's taken you pretty much your whole career to get to that last one.
Yeah. That's absolutely, it did. And I would have never been able to do it if I hadn't reached out to fairs and told them about my desire. And, fairs were so supportive. They're just such a friendly bunch of people. They were like, sure, we want to help you with your bucket list. And so there are a few fairs in Wisconsin that are not considered official county fairs. So official means that they get state aid from the Department of Ag on supporting their premiums that are paid at the fairs. Mm-hmm. And after I accomplished the official fairs, I thought, well, I want to go to those other couple fairs too. So last summer I was invited to the Stoughton Fair, very popular, big fair.
It is.
They just don't receive state aid. And in 2 weeks, I'm going up to the Amherst Fair. It's the Portage County Fair at Amherst, and that's a non-funded state fair. But then I think I'll be able to say I really have judged at every fair in the state.
Well, you've also judged at the Wisconsin State Fair and even the National Pie Baking Championships.
Yeah, you can tell I really love judging. And people have said to me, oh, how can you make those decisions? I wouldn't want to tell anybody that they did anything wrong. And I guess that is part of what it takes to be a judge. You really do have to know what you're judging and have some expertise in that area. And then you have to be able to make a decision and say, this one's better than this one. And I still think back to that. Well, I only showed cattle 1 year, but I watched a lot of it over the years. The judge would say, this heifer is over this heifer because of this and this reason. And I do the same thing when I'm judging. This item is better than this one. You have to have a reason for it. And so I think I'm good at making those kind of decisions. So when I was first invited to judge at State Fair, I thought, oh, me? No, I couldn't judge at State Fair. And I turned them down a couple times. And then somebody said to me, Becky, do it. It's not any different than judging at a county fair. And so I went and did it. Well, it was a little different. There's a much bigger audience, and they're all watching you and waiting for your comments. But I think I did okay, and they keep asking me back for different areas, so it's fun.
Well, the National Pie Baking, I wouldn't have mind being in that one. The National Pie Baking Championship. It
is, and you can do it. Their rule for their judges is they want half the judges to be people with some kind of expertise in the field, and the other half, they want Joe Blow off the street who just says, I love pie. And so then the judges are in teams of 10, and everybody tastes the pie and evaluates it, fills out the little score sheet. Then they add them up and average them. What a great way to come to a composite score. But the first year that I signed up to judge there, they were very excited that I was an actual fair judge. And I said, well, who else do you get? And they said, oh, I like people who work for Crisco, or people who are recipe authors, or newspaper or food columnists. I said, oh, okay, I can do this. But you had to pick what categories you'd be interested in judging. And I said, any. I can judge anything. I don't mind. But I said to my family, watch, I'll get something stupid like raisin pies. I did get raisin pies. And they're okay. They're so sweet. But not one of them was as good as my mother's raisin pie. So.
There you go. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot. I once got a blue ribbon for my chocolate chip cookies, which I was very proud of. But now, if you're judging chocolate chip cookies, what would you look for to judge how one chocolate set of chocolate chip cookies is better than another?
Oh, yeah. And this is why I think you have to be a tasting judge, because it's not all on appearance, but that's the first thing I look at is how does it look? And for the fair, I want all the cookies to be evenly shaped and the same size, so no big ones and little ones in the set. And then I flip them all over, and I'm looking at the bottom. Is it brown enough? And, it certainly shouldn't be too brown or burnt. And then I very gently break them open, and I'm feeling for the tenderness or the toughness of that. And then I take a little taste, a tiny taste. I roll that little bit around in my mouth, and I'm checking to see if there's anything that jumps out at me. It's a chocolate chip cookie. They all taste pretty good. But is there too much salt? Is there not enough salt? Is it bland? And then I can taste what kind of butter did they use or shortening. And, if somebody's butter is old and getting a little rancid, I can taste that in the cookie. And so it's really developing that flavor profile in your head. You have to know what you're tasting for. But so it's looks, it's texture, it's taste, Larry, all of those things.
Well, now you've told me. I
now
guess
you know.
I guess I was in top form for all of those appearance, taste, and texture.
Great.
Well, what if you got two sets that are in your mind identical, but you have to give one over the other?
That
is
would
there
happen
some other?
Yes.
There has to be some other thing that would be a.
Oh, you might, if it's chocolate chip cookies, you might look at how many chocolate chips are in them and just the uniformity of all those cookies together. So, yeah, we really have to get nitpicky. And in open class judging, you can only have one blue ribbon and one red ribbon and one white and one pink, and everybody else doesn't get anything. So we have to be very picky. And that is hard I think cookies are the hardest because so many of them are pretty good.
Yeah, and I suppose and perhaps in other than chocolate chip cookies, other small things, like maybe it's like some kind of really cool way they were shown or exhibited.
Yes, yep. I judged pies on Saturday at the Stoughton Fair, and what a contest that was. We went through 143 pies, and we did taste every one of them. Oh, my gosh. It's going to be a while before I want to see another pie. But those little tips that you're asking for, sometimes it is just how you garnish the top of that pie. Is your whipped cream, if you're using that, really neatly spaced? Or did you just kind of swirl it over the whole top of the pie haphazardly? That made the difference between a couple pies on Saturday. And so we look at those finer things. Once in a while, something will come in on a plate that looks a little used, and it doesn't show off the exhibit to the best. And so then I might move that one down a little bit in my placing. So
lots of little different things. I was thinking about, I once judged the Wisconsin Potato and Vegetable Growers Association potato contest, which I think I was in West Town Mall in Madison. We were right in the middle of the mall. The judges up on a platform, and it was judging appetizers, main courses, and desserts, all with potatoes as the primary ingredient. And as I had to give some discussion at the end, and I said, I'm not sure I want to look a potato in its eyes.
exactly. And its eyes. Good joke, too. That is a little more intimidating when you're up on a stage like that. And that's the case at State Fair. They have a special they have a lot of special competitions at State Fair. And one is for local food producers who are trying to get some traction for their new products. And they have us up on a stage. And so the people in the audience are watching everything we do. They're watching every expression on our face. And so, if I want to talk to the other judge and say, what did you really think of this one? We kind of turn our backs to the audience for a little bit so they can't read our lips.
Oh, man. So with somebody with a new product, I can see the motivation there. But what motivates people to have their handiwork judged by a bunch of strangers?
Oh, well, I think from the time fairs began, and you'll probably talk about this a little bit more in the next half hour, but people like to see how their product or their handicrafts do compared to others. We all have that little bit of self-worth we're seeking. We want to be proud of the things that we do. And when we are, we want to see if other people think the same way we do. So, agricultural societies have been exhibiting farm animals for hundreds of years. And then the farm wives joined in and said, well, I'd like to show off my cake or my pie. And then when 4-H started, the fairs became a fabulous way for kids to show off what they've learned in 4-H and what their projects have taught them. And so when I'm judging anybody, but kids especially, I really feel like I'm a teacher, and I want to give them some feedback on their project, to give them some ideas of what they could do better, and get them motivated to do more or learn more. I had a young man one year at a fair who made a wonderful pasta dish. He told me in detail exactly how he made it, and it was delicious. I gave him a blue ribbon, and I'm pretty sure he got the best of show at that fair. And a lot of fairs ask their judges back for 2 or 3 years in a row before they rotate them. So the next year I was back at the same fair. The same young man showed up with exactly the same dish. And I said to him, so what did you do different with it this year? I remember last year you brought this and I gave you a blue ribbon. He said, yeah. I said, well, what did you do differently this year? What did you change? Well, nothing. I said, what did you learn new? Well, nothing. And I gave him a red ribbon because they said, you're 16 years old. You should be learning to challenge yourself and try new things all the time. And I think he went away satisfied that he had not deserved a blue ribbon. So...
Gerald emailed and wonders, did anybody ever try to bribe you?
No. They couldn't bribe me with food because they get enough of it while I'm judging.
Oh, and Samantha wondered if you've been to the Trempealeau County Fair, and also what's your favorite thing about county fairs?
Oh, every fair is unique, but I always love their 4-H food stands because I'm such an advocate for 4-H, and so I always want to go see what they're selling for their food items. And then, of course, I would come back and report to our Columbia County 4-H leaders, did you know they have this? Did you know they have this? And I have been to the Trempealeau County Fair. In fact, I'm going there next week. I judge vegetables and flowers there almost every year. Apparently they like my judging style. And so it's a nice little drive, and as long as they keep asking me back, I'm willing to go.
Someone else is wondering about the different styles of judging. Talk about that a bit.
Yes. There is Danish judging, which is where 1/4 of the product entries get a blue ribbon, 1/4 of them get a second place or red, 1/4 of them get a white, and 1/4 get a pink or fourth place. So in that class of 44 brownies, way back when, 11 could get blue ribbons, 11 reds, 11 whites, 11 pinks. Some counties still use that. It's not as popular anymore because, if you have 8 items, Larry, and they're really all good, you can only give 2 of them blue ribbons. It's tough on the kids. It's tough on the judges. So that's the style I grew up when I was a kid. Now many fairs have gone to something we call face-to-face judging, and this is used only in youth. The kids bring their items directly to the judge, and we talk about them, and I can find out what they learned and give them those pointers in person. The thing that is a little hard for the public to understand when they see items that have been judged face-to-face is they don't know what that conversation was that I had. I might have a child who really struggled because they didn't have the motor skills yet maybe to do the thing they were attempting, but they learned so much, and they were able to tell me that, and what they knew what they did wrong and could improve on. I might give that child a blue ribbon for effort. But, the public might look at that and say, oh, why did that get a blue ribbon? Well, you don't know what I know. And then there's just regular or straight judging. That's what we use in open class, where only one blue ribbon is awarded, one red, one white, and one pink. So,
well, that makes a lot of sense to me. There was one memorable moment involving a bear, I believe.
Oh, yes. I was judging at the Iron County Fair way up north, and it was face-to-face judging, and so one young boy brought a poster in about his poultry project, and he had great photos of the pen that he and his dad built, and he told me how he fed them, when he got them, when they were going to start to lay eggs. And I said, so are you going to have chickens here at the fair? And he says, no, a bear broke in the other night, destroyed the pen, and ate all my chickens. I was so sad. I almost brought him to tears by asking about it. But at least he had the pictures of the pen and the chickens before the bear got in there. So I sent him away with the idea that he and his dad need to come up with a bear-proof chicken cage.
If somebody's interested in becoming a county fair judge, how do they do it?
That's a great question. We really need more judges because I'm getting old. I can't do this forever. So the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection handles licensing judges in Wisconsin. So if you go to datcap.wi.gov, look for the county and district fairs page, and then scroll down, and there's a fair judge application. And you will have to state what area you would like to judge. You have to state what your qualifications are, why you feel that you would be able to judge that project area.
Well, it's having judged, been a judge myself in a lot of food contests. I really enjoy it, and I would invite anybody else who's interested in that kind of judging to give it a try. Becky, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today, and good luck with your judging this afternoon.
You're welcome, and we're right at the beginning of the fair season, so people need to find out when their fair is and visit their fair, visit some neighboring fairs. It's a lot of fun.
Becky Gutzman is a retired UW Extension educator for Columbia and Dodge counties. She's been doing it for more than 50 years, and as you can tell, she still has a lot of enthusiasm for not only judging, but for county fairs. And speaking of that, coming up next, Jerry Apps wrote a book about the history of Wisconsin county fairs, and we'll revisit an earlier conversation I had with him about that. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Larry Mealer here. We're starting the show today by talking about fairs with Jerry Apps. And today we're talking about his book. It's called Meet Me on the Midway, A History of Wisconsin Fairs. Jerry Apps, welcome back. Good to have you with us again.
It's always good to be with you, Larry.
So when did you decide to write about fairs? Or maybe why did you decide to write about fairs?
Well, there's part of me, the other day I was thinking, why didn't I do this a lot sooner?
I actually wondered that too.
I was so busy writing about every other aspect of Wisconsin rural history, it didn't dawn on me that the obvious would be to write about county than state fairs, because as an early 4-H member, I spent 10 years showing at fairs, and then I became a county agent, a county extension agent in Green Lake County first, and then in Brown County, where I had a whole lot of responsibility for running a fair. And then I was a fair judge for 14 years. I had a lot of personal experience with fairs, and it dawned on me, well, I'd better write some of this down before I get older.
I was so glad you did, because, fairs always meant a lot to me and the people in our communities. And I have so many great memories about my time at fairs. So it was fun to get your take on it, and just to learn a little bit. Fairs go way back to Roman times, don't they?
Ooh, they go back to 500 BC. One of the early definitions of a fair, and it was in the Encyclopedia Britannica, they defined a fair as a temporary market where buyers and sellers gather to transact business. That's not a whole lot like fairs are today, but those very early fairs, going back to the Roman era, were that. There were business opportunities mixed in with a religious celebration. It was a strange kind of situation, especially when we think of what fairs are today. But it was in about 200 BC that the Romans took the idea of a fair to Northern Europe, to Germany and to Austria and the Scandinavian countries and so on. And it was at that time that the fairs began to morph from this strictly business religious model to having an agricultural dimension to them, to having livestock. And when those early immigrants came to the United States, they brought with them the idea of a fair. So I find that history kind of interesting.
Yeah, I did as well. And fairs, as you write, fairs for agriculture, as far as agriculture was concerned, became a pretty important part.
That's exactly right. In fact, the very first fair in the United States was in Pittsfield, Massachusetts in 1807. And at that fair, which today we wouldn't even call it a fair, a chap had his new collection of, call it I think it was 5 merino sheep on display in a county park. And somebody said, well, it looks like a fair to me. So that's the first fair. The first fair in Wisconsin was in 1842 in Waukesha. There were 4 horses entered. There were a few sheep, a few hogs, and there was a plowing contest. But notice it was all animals. It was all farm animals, and it was all for men. No women, no young people. So, but anyway, 6 years before we became a state, we had a fair.
Yeah, man. So what makes a fair a fair? It takes up a big bulk of your, at least a portion of your book.
A major part of the book, because I thought that was to coin a phrase, a fair question to ask.
Okay.
And today, and for many, many years in the history of fairs, the exhibits that men, women, and later 4-H and FFA members and other young people entered, that was the core of the fair, the various kinds of exhibits, going from dairy cattle in Wisconsin to sheep, hogs, beef, chickens, and all of that, to the women's side of the picture with clothing and baked goods and all of that sort of thing. So, and then too, when 4-H came along, and after 1912 generally, here we began to see 4-H projects on display. And soon, the youth exhibits became a major part of fairs, and they still are. So exhibits are the core, I think, of what makes a fair a fair. But we can't talk about what makes a fair without talking about the judges and what they did and the educational dimension of the fair, because farmers were not at all hesitant to share with each other what they knew and how they were raising their livestock and what breeds they were entertaining, what they were carrying on in their agriculture pursuit. And the fair was an opportunity for farmers to show off their cattle and to, by virtue of having them judged, see what excellence was, to see how what they were doing compared to what their neighbors were doing. How did they stack up, so to speak? And you would say, well, why didn't? Well, isn't that sort of an awful situation if you lose out? Farmers didn't feel that way. My dad exhibited at the Waushara County Fair in 1927. And when he was in his 80s, I interviewed him about a whole bunch of things, including the fair. And he said that going to the county fair in 1927-28 was the most exciting, interesting thing he'd ever done on the farm. And he drove the cattle. I really had 12, 14 cows at the time. Drove the cattle down the country, dusty road from Wild Rose, west of Wild Rose, where our farm was located, to Watoma. It was like 8-10 miles on a dusty road. He driving a team of horses on a load of hay, the hay to be used to feed the cattle while they're at the fair. So the educational dimension I come back to was an important part through the judging, through the exhibits, and it still is, of the fair. It was an educational event, but not to leave behind, when we talk about what makes a fair, the rides. Oh my gosh, the kids and the young people, and most everybody, they will come to the fair because here's an opportunity. Ride on the Ferris wheel and the merry-go-round and the tilter wheel and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So I could go on, but there are other dimensions, of course, to the fair. But there's the entertainment side, the educational side, and today I would make the very strong point that the county fair and the state fair is a way to bring together rural and urban people and to come to the fair and to see animals. What a wonderful way of introducing to the urban folk, to kids, where their food comes from. A little bit about what agriculture is about today. That's one of the important dimensions of what makes a fair, an opportunity to show off in the most positive kind of way agriculture, farming today, as well as the history of it all. I could go on.
Kenneth in Beloit wonders if, he was wondering if Janesville held the first fair in Wisconsin.
No, Janesville had the first state fair in Wisconsin. There's an important difference. The first state fair in Janesville was held in 1851. And that's an important distinction. Not the first county fair in Rock County, but the first state fair, 1851. And in the state fair history is really interesting because the state fair
moved around.
Moved all over the place just quickly. It was 6 times in Janesville, 11 times in Madison, where Camp Randall is now. That was the state fairgrounds at one time. 18 times in Milwaukee, not West Allis, in Milwaukee. Twice in Fond du Lac. And then starting in 1892, it settled in West Allis, and it has been there ever since. But the very first one, 1851, was in Janesville.
I was thinking as I was reading through the book, and I landed on the Northern Wisconsin State Fair, and I thought, well, you know what? I broadcast live from there, and I broadcast live from the Wisconsin State Fair in Milwaukee, so I've done both. But that's still going in the northern part of the state.
And it started because the whole idea of, holy moly, we're going to go all the way to Milwaukee with our horses and our oxen, and maybe that take forever to get there. We'll start our own fair, and that's what they did. And it's still going on. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is. Jerry App's our guest today. His book is called Meet Me on the Midway, A History of Wisconsin Fairs. Taking a look at the history of fairs on the show today with Jerry App's, author of the book Meet Me on the Midway, A History of Wisconsin Fairs. Terry and Roberts emailed to ask when rides became a big part of fairs.
That's a very good question, because the early fairs did not have a midway, did not have rides, did not have sideshows and all that sort of thing. It was in 1893 at the Columbian Exposition, the World's Fair in Chicago, that rides were first introduced. And indeed, the Ferris wheel was introduced at that 1893 World's Fair. And this chap, this Mr. Harris, an engineer, he was asked by the controlling interests of that World's Fair to come up with an idea, to invent something, to develop something that could be in competition with the Eiffel Tower in terms of something that would capture people's attention. And he came up with the Ferris wheel.
A big one.
A huge monster of an outfit. And I discussed that in the book in some depth. But it was at that Columbian Exposition in 1893 that the idea of a midway was introduced, and the idea of rides being introduced, and the whole idea of a carnival dimension to the fair, that became alive and well. And within a couple of years, every fair across the country had a Ferris wheel. In fact, it wasn't a fair in the minds of many unless there was a Ferris wheel that became the icon to define a fair. And then the cover of my book, I've got a picture of a midway, of course, with a Ferris wheel in the background. So that's a very good question, because fairs for years did not have anything along the lines of what a midway is about today.
When I was a kid, that was the highlight of, or a big highlight of the summer was, for me, the Cottage Grove Festival, the Stoughton Junior Fair, and the Dane County Fair.
Oh, yes. And one of the things that we little farm kids in Washoe County, I really never been off the farm much. I never been overnight off the farm. I mean, if you had a small dairy farm, you stayed pretty close to home because you milked cows twice a day. But we bought, our 4-H club bought an old used Army tent. I think we paid $25 for it. And then we pitched that on the far end of the fairgrounds. And we each had an old used Army cot. I've still got my old cot. $5 we paid for it. And what a wonderful, oh my gosh, I've never had more fun in my life. Here, the 4-H kids are all sleeping in this tent, not really behaving ourselves, but trying to, and then being responsible for taking care of our calves, which are on the other end of the fairgrounds. I mean, I have never forgotten that experience. I didn't have any money, but I still remember vividly the smell of hamburgers and onions on the midway. Isn't that funny?
Oh, yeah.
Now, when I smell hamburgers and onions, I'm right back at the Washoe County Fair. Fun of it all. I should add this in terms of the book. One of the things that I try to do in all of my books is tell some stories. And I have a whole section in this fair book on stories that people sent me. Stories about meeting their spouses at the fair. You'll be surprised how many 4-H kids found, as they got older, they found their girlfriends and boyfriends and married them as a result of working at the fair. Number of those stories, and I just found that really kind of interesting. And then I just got to share this quick story. There were these sideshows that were, some of them were just frauds. Anyway, my dad told this story about this at the Washoe County Fair back in the 20s. There was a big tent. There was a big sign outside that said, "See the horse with its tail where its head ought to be." Well, who wouldn't want to see such a horse? 25 cents. People lined up to come in. It was a kind of a dark dark, dingy tent. My dad went in, and here was a great big old Belgian horse backed into its stall. Its head was where its tail ought to be. And he was so ashamed that he'd been taken. He didn't say a word. He snuck out the back of the tent, as did everybody else, and that great big old line continued 25 cents to see the horse with its head where its tail ought to be.
Oh man, the feds kind of got involved really early on, and brought the sort of the Federal Extension Service into the fair, and part of it, I believe, resulted in 4-H.
Sure, 1912, the Smith-Lever Act, passed by the Congress, had within it the creation of a program for Boys and Girls Clubs. The actual title of 4-H came along a little bit later, but that was the federal law that created cooperative extension and helped support the county agent movement across the country.
And so extension got really heavily involved as you're kind of living proof of that. You spent a lot of time organizing the Brown County Fair.
Exactly, and the Green Lake County Fair, where I started. Oh yes, the stories are never ending. As I put a little, I write a column for ag newspapers, Wisconsin State Farmer. I write a weekly column, and I put the word out that I wanted some stories about fairs, and they began rolling in. I mean, I got stories from all over the state. A lot of them are in the book. I couldn't include everything, but it said to me that people love the fairs. They saw the fairs as something much more than the Ferris wheel and the games of chance and the sideshows and all that stuff. They saw the fair as a way, as I said earlier, to bring people together. They might not see people on the far end of the county only once a year, but that was something they looked forward to.
Carol emailed that the fair she remembers was the one that didn't happen. She was a kid growing up on the farm in the 50s and earned fair money by picking beans. But one year it was canceled due to a polio outbreak.
Well, I'm a polio survivor, as most people who know me are aware of. And so I wrote a book on as you might guess, called Living Through Life, on my polio experience. And at the time, I had polio in 1947. And the vaccine didn't come along until 1955, I believe. And at the time, a number of county fairs were canceled because of polio. Wisconsin was hit really hard, especially along the Fox River Valley, Appleton, Fond du Lac, all along there. And that was the time when I had polio. So there were other times, and I talk about that in the books. The Civil War, as you might guess, was a time when the fairs were put on hold. The COVID, the most recent experience, the fairs were canceled. It was a terrible situation. So we know about canceled fairs. But what encourages me is that they've come back. They didn't disappear. As you look at restaurants, for example, they've disappeared left and right. The county fair survived COVID. Why? Because people saw the importance of it. That's my judgment, anyway.
Yeah.
And as I've talked to a lot of fair directors, and they said to me, we are firmly behind the concept of the county fair, even though people say, well, geez, there's only a handful of people living in the farming anymore. The fair is so much more than just farming. That's extremely important, but it's a lot more than that. It's what I said earlier about how to help our urban cousins understand a bit more of who we are as farm people and what our lives are like and where your food is coming from and how it is prepared and how it shapes up. And as you go through the barns and the exhibit areas, how farmers' exhibits are stacking up one against the other. People look at that. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I can go on as I have forever. I have a whole section in the book about entertainment, and that's a very interesting and sometimes controversial part of the fair, because as sort of cynically, some people say, well, the people that come to the fair to entertain are those who are on their way up in importance and in notoriety, and those who are on their way back down again.
But
I'm not so sure that's true, because I can remember, especially at the state fair, where the TV people that you liked were there, and
Johnny Carson was there.
Oh yeah, you had people that you saw on the television. Now you could see them in person. That was a big deal. And I've got to tell you one quick story about one. I happened to have spent a week at the State Fair in 1948, which was the Centennial Exposition, and the State Fair went on for a whole month. And I was there, a little kid, I don't know, I was 13, 14 years old. I was there with my calves. And I was at the WTM, I looked at the WTMJ, they had a little building there, and I saw this thing. It was sitting up there. It was all kind of foggy and snowy, and it sat underneath television. And I couldn't make out anything. I couldn't hardly see it. And I came home and I said to my dad, I saw this thing at the State Fair. They call it television. I think that's never going to amount to anything. It's just a
fad. Oh, boy.
Yes.
Well,
little did I know.
What you have a favorite? Well, I imagine your favorite county fair is the Waushara County Fair.
Yeah, because but there everybody has their favorite fair, and I must say, let's support it, and just by attending, that's a support, and it's an icon for Wisconsin agriculture. It's something that I hope goes on for a very long time.
Yeah, I do as well. I have a fond memory at the State Fair of winning a parakeet.
Well, what did you do with a parakeet?
I gave it to the girl who I was sweet on at the time.
How wonderful. Bought a chameleon for 25 cents. Not cheap. The chameleon is like a little lizard that changes colors with changes. Paid 25 cents for it. I gave it to my dad to take home. He'd come to watch the judging of my cattle, and I gave this chameleon a little box. And my dad didn't know about chameleons, and as they were driving home, 4-H leader was along, the chameleon got out of the box, and there was almost a car wreck. They pulled off to the side, and they took the car all apart to find this chameleon, as they figured it was a dangerous animal.
Oh, boy. I tell you what, your book is so much fun to read, Jerry. It brought back a lot of memories. I hope a lot of people have a chance to look at it and read it. Lots of great photos as well. Which
my son Steve is a professional photographer. He took a lot of the photos. I took some of them, and there are a lot of historic ones that I got out of the archives at the Historical Society. Wisconsin Historical Society Press is the publishers of the book, by the way. And if you want to learn more about my stuff and what I do, my website is simply jerryapps, JERYAPPS.com. And there you can see the television work that I do and the writing that I do and so on.
Always a pleasure, Jerry. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much. I can't say enough good things about Larry Mueller, and you have thousands of people who hang on every word you say.
Jerry Apps, his book, again, the title of it is Meet Me on the Midway, A History of Wisconsin Fairs. That's the subtitle of it. It really is a fun book.